Alrighty, so we just got a lot of news when it comes to Borderlands 4. For those that may have missed it, a couple days ago we got the BL4 State of Play, which was a full 20 minutes of gameplay, systems, and tons of other stuff relating to Borderlands 4. And if you want to see my full initial impressions and 3 hours of us dissecting the entire 20 minutes, the full 3-hour VOD is posted over under my live tab on my channel. But there was a few things that stuck out to me that I kind of specifically want to discuss in this video. Now, I want to be clear, this is not going to be a Doom post or anything. As I said, I'm still really looking forward to this game. I think it's looking great. I think there's just a few things with the systems that could maybe do with a little bit of criticism. But I'm going to do my best here to be completely constructive, offer up some solutions and why I think these are actually issues. And of course, these are all my opinions. I want this video to be a discussion. If you have differing opinions or other ideas, I would love to hear them down in the comments below. But actually getting on into things here, what are the issues that I'm having? Well, the absolute crux of my concerns are in build diversity. I'm someone who loves these games for the end game and specifically build crafting. A majority of the time that I play these games is spent theory crafting, playing around with different gear and guns, trying to find what works, finding what doesn't work, and experimenting with just every single possible option that I can. And I do understand that this is a pretty niche subsection of the fan base. This is not what a majority of the people that play this game are. Borderlands has always had an incredibly large casual fan base that really doesn't care about all this shit. But this is a huge part of the very dedicated fan base. These are the people, like myself, playing this game 6 years after launch. Hell, I still play all of these games going all the way back to BL1 because of this, because of how free and open that they are. And the first thing that immediately stuck out to me as potentially being an issue with this is the way that the skill tree system works. Now, this part is going to have the most speculation out of any of my points in this video, because these skill trees could be perfectly fine depending on what the level cap is and depending on how many skill points we end up with. For those that may not know, the way that skill trees are going to work in BL4 is that we still have the classic 3 skill tree setup. However, we have a hell of a lot more skills within these trees. Each tree, at a certain point, allows you to also branch off into separate subtrees. But these subtrees are completely self-contained. Any skill points spent to get into these subtrees stay to progressing that specific subtree. Now, you can spend your points to go all the way down into multiple different of these subtrees, and while I do think that this is an interesting system, and again, this is the least potentially problematic system I'm going to talk about in this video, the way I see this, it feels like it's just more artificially limiting than if you were just given a massive skill tree that you were instead allowed to just freely progress through like in the other games. Now, of course, with each branch having a capstone in it, that could be problematic, and maybe they want to dissuade people from having multiple different capstones in a single tree. Thing is, that system is already in place. By the looks of it, at least with Vex, you can't have multiple capstones because all of the capstones are a specific augment slot. Now, this could be a Vex specific thing with her skill trees, but I assume it's not, again, for the previously stated reason of they likely don't want you to be able to have multiple different capstones active at once. Again, that is also just entirely speculation based off the trees that we saw of a single character. But the point that I'm making with bringing that up is that if capstones are part of their worries about balancing these trees and why they're locking them, there's ways of only limiting that rather than limiting progression throughout the entire tree. But if this was the only thing, I really wouldn't care about this. It's a different take on the skill tree system. It still feels pretty Borderlands-y, but it's not the only system that is potentially limiting build diversity. We're gonna jump from the least egregious to the most egregious in the enhancement system. This is what is replacing artifacts. Instead of artifacts, you have what seems to be 3 different slots where you can equip enhancements. Enhancements give specific manufacturer bonuses that affect any guns with licensed parts from those manufacturers. We'll touch on licensed parts in a second, but this effectively means that if you want to min-max your build, ideally you have 3 enhancements focused on the same manufacturer, and you make sure that each of the guns that you're using have at least 1 licensed part from your chosen manufacturer. These enhancements do also seem to come with some sort of additional ability, though they didn't really touch on that too much. This straight up just dissuades experimentation. This doesn't reward you for using a specific manufacturer. This demands that you use a specific manufacturer. This also makes the gear grind significantly worse because if you want to min-max your build, which is a term that they used a hell of a lot in this presentation, so clearly it's something that they know people want to do, you have to grind out at least the specific licensed part on the gun that you want, which we have no idea how base stats are calculated. They never mentioned if these licensed parts affect base stats. They never mentioned if there's a separate BL3 style part system going on underneath the licensed system, although I do suspect that there is. So we don't know exactly how rough this gear grind is going to be, but it is at least going to be worse than BL3 is currently, and at worst, it's going to be worse than BL3 was when you couldn't re-roll anointments. Because the way that these licensed parts work is that they give you the manufacturer gimmick of the manufacturer that has those licensed parts. Let's take a look at this Molly 1 SMG. It has, of course, the Molly 1 manufacturer part, but it also additionally has the Torg licensed sticky mag, which lets it fire sticky gyrojets, and it has the Tediore licensed accessory, giving it legs when it's chucked. This is just straight up giving a Molly 1 SMG other manufacturer gimmicks. And while this, of course, is in service of the way that enhancements are working, what brand identity is there? How is a Vladov gun with a Molly 1 part going to be any different from a Molly 1 gun with a Vladov part, other than just how it looks visually? Once you get your full set of gear of the same manufacturer, if you want to pick up a gun off the ground and play around with it, you're going to be nerfing yourself because your enhancements aren't going to be functioning properly with it. So you've got to either just use the same set of guns forever, sticking to one manufacturer, or at least one set of manufacturer parts, only being able to get the full effect out of a gun with your build as long as they also roll with one of those parts, or you carry around a backpack full of enhancements for each manufacturer that you can swap to. However, this comes back to the gear grind. If you were to do that to be able to enjoy every gun to the fullest, and you want to min-max your setup, again, taking that word that they throw around a hell of a lot in this, you need to grind out 3 god-rolled enhancements for each manufacturer. That is what a perfect build setup will look like in BL4. A backpack full of enhancements. Remember how everyone hated anointments because of how oppressive they were and how important they were to builds and how utterly game-changing it was to have the right anointment on a gun that you were using? How difficult they made it to pick up and experiment with other weapons? This is going to be the same issue, if not 10 times worse. Well, of course, right now we don't have any evidence that these are going to be anywhere even nearly as strong as anointments were, and honestly, I really doubt that they will be. The reason I say that is because if you have these equipped and you pick up a gun that does not match manufacturers with what you currently have equipped, effectively 1 to 3 of your gear slots are doing absolutely nothing for you in that moment, which would just feel like shit. And on top of that, we lost artifacts for this. Now, with these enhancements being a core progression system that is tied to these manufacturer bonuses, this also very likely means that while we didn't see any legendary item cards in this showcase, it's pretty safe to assume that they're also going to be using this licensed parts system. The reason I bring this up is because of this specific line that they say in the state of play.
We've worked hard to make sure all our gear feels better than ever, while also making rarity matter again. This makes for our most satisfying loot chase ever. And at the top of everything are legendaries. These have always had unique effects that you won't find on any other piece of gear. But in Borderlands 3, they drop too often. This not only devalued legendaries, it made everything feel less valuable. In our new system, not only do all guns feel great, but now legendaries will truly be special events.
All our gear feels better than ever, making rarity matter again. Legendaries drop too often, devaluing legendaries, but also made everything else feel less valuable. All guns feel great. Now, this is addressing some very common talking points about BL3 and especially the endgame of BL3. While these talking points are common, not all of them are correct. And I promise I'm not just talking out my ass here. I actually feel quite uniquely qualified to talk on lower rarities in the endgame of BL3. I have an entire series on this very channel talking about just that. The prime misconception here is that purple guns are not used in the endgame of BL3 because they're bad. This just straight up is not true. Let me first say, rarities in BL3 I think have felt better than ever. In BL2 and TPS, if you picked up a purple gun or a blue gun, those were going to fall off around the same time no matter what. In BL3, a white gun might carry you 2 levels. A green probably gonna carry you through 3 or 4. A blue is definitely gonna be good for even longer than that, but a purple is probably going to be able to carry you 10 plus levels depending on what it is. And at the end game, there's plenty of purples that are absolutely incredible. A personal favorite of mine is a ×2 Preacher, and there's not even really a legendary counterpart that feels as good and simple to use as that Preacher. That is a gun that I actually use quite often myself, but even as someone that actively uses these purple rarity guns, I do it with the understanding that I'm actively nerfing myself because I'm just not getting as much value out of that weapon slot as I could by equipping a legendary. The way that they word it makes it seem like this issue is because purple rarity weapons suck, and this again is the very common assumption with purple guns at the end game of BL3. The actual reason that purple weapons are not used, this goes for purple class mods as well, is that there's absolutely nothing unique to them that does not exist in a legendary gun. There's no systems that are specific to purple guns. Almost every purple gun that is good has a legendary counterpart. The Q system was a purple gun that was actually used for quite some time in the endgame of BL3 up until the OPQ system came out. Non-unique weapons need to have some sort of draw to them. And as it's looking right now, it seems like that's just not going to be the case in BL4. Purple weapons are still going to have the same issues that they have always faced, in that there's no reason to pick one up over a legendary. There's no reason to use that slot for a purple when you could instead have a nice shiny orange in it that's going to probably have better stats on top of having a unique weapon effect. BL4 actually does have a chance to solve this though, and I think it does lie in this licensed parts system. It seems like the way that it currently works is that each tier of weapon gets another roll at these licensed parts. This is what also makes me think that there is actually an underlying part system that will affect the damage and fire rate and all those other stats of the gun. Again, more similar to BL3, because if that's not there, then that would mean that every white rarity gun that you pick up from a manufacturer is probably just going to be the same. You get a white rarity TDR pistol, that would be the same as another white rarity TDR pistol, which I highly doubt is the case, but again, this part is speculation. But it seems like purple guns have either 2 or 3 weapon rolls. Going back to that purple Mollywan SMG, there's 3 slots there, but one of them is taken up by a Mollywan part. Can't really say if this is just because it is a Mollywan, or if they are able to roll licensed parts of their own manufacturer. But again, with the existence of enhancements, that does imply that this part system also applies to legendaries. Whether they get an additional slot or they're the same as purples, it's again going to just overshadow non-unique guns. So get rid of licensed parts on legendaries. That is an incredibly strong draw to give to them, in fact, while keeping the legendary grind actually better than it otherwise would be, because again, likely we still have that underlying part system, and as they stated, legendaries are going to be harder to find than they were in BL3. If you had a harder legendary hunt on top of having to roll potentially 3 different licensed parts of what you want, that's probably going to turn away a hell of a lot of people. But you get rid of that, you make the grind more reasonable, you actually give a reason to use purple rarity guns. Now, for the enhancements, I think these honestly need to be reworked from the ground up. I'm not against them replacing artifacts, as effectively this is actually something that I kind of theorized about in a previous video where I talk about class mods. These are, in a way, replacing the passives that you find on class mods and artifacts, letting you grind out just those specific little stat numbers and equip them as an item themselves. I think this item slot is good. I just think that all of them being strictly manufacturer focused is terrible. Once again, this is just artificially limiting build diversity. This is forcing you to use specific rolls of guns and just sticking to specific manufacturers. Think of it as if every single artifact in BL3 was just some sort of variation on the Company Man. I think the Company Man existing as a piece of gear for people that want to min-max a specific manufacturer is incredible. Having that as an option is fantastic, but that's exactly what it should be, an option. The end game of Borderlands should always be about options. If someone wants to run a build focused on a specific manufacturer, they should absolutely have that option. I should also have the option to be able to run a whole hodgepodge of other random bullshit that is somehow min-maxed to an insane degree because of some niche-ass interaction. I don't want every single build ever to just end up as an Allegiance run, which by the way would make Allegiance runs a hell of a lot more boring when the end game is just that anyways. I want to be able to get creative with my builds, and I want to be able to experiment with them in any way that I see fit. A lot of the systems that they have shown so far seem like they're actually limiting potential build diversity. And while currently it does look like there's so many more ways to express yourself with these builds, and so many more options than we had in BL3, again, as many options as there are, there's a lot more limitations on each of these options. Now this isn't it though, because there's another system that I would like to talk about, and that is the Ordinances system. Instead of having a heavy weapons class of guns, we have Ordinances. The Ordnance slot gives you the option to equip a heavy weapon as a cooldown ability. Instead of consuming ammo from your backpack, you just have it on a cooldown. You can pull it out whenever you want, fire off your shots, get it back on cooldown, and once it's back off, you can use it again. Now, this opens up a hell of a lot of options for general gameplay and general use gun builds. But this is also potentially killing an entire class of build, and at the very best, heavily limiting it. Full launcher builds or heavy weapon builds have existed as long as the franchise has. We've had skill trees specifically built around using rocket launchers, and honestly, I fully expect that to be the case here. I fully expect ordnance builds to be a thing and to be fully viable. The issue comes in that you have a single slot. For general builds, this is a great thing. This is effectively a fifth weapon slot for you to utilize. But if you've played Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and you've played as a specifically melee character, you understand that what this actually means is while general builds get a nice fun new toy to play with, if you decide to go for an ordnance build, you have 4 useless weapon slots. In your general gameplay, you get to use a single weapon unless you open your inventory and are constantly swapping out to play with different things. And while yes, you can do this, and while yes, it's not unheard of to be constantly swapping shit out in Borderlands games, once again, those that have played melee builds in Wonderlands, I feel ya, it's really not fun to do, and it interrupts gameplay, and especially in BL4, where this is some of the smoothest, most fluid gameplay that we have probably seen, having to constantly interrupt that to swap out your ordnance is going to suck. Now, again, while I want to offer solutions here, I really don't know how to solve this without scrapping this system, which as much as I don't like it, I don't think that's going to happen, which is a shame because I'm a huge fan of the launcher builds across all the games. I think they were incredibly fun, incredibly unique playstyles, and very enjoyable to theorycraft around. But it seems like they're going to be the way of melee builds in Wonderlands where they're totally viable, you can absolutely do it, you just don't get as many toys to play with as a traditional build does. Now, after all that, I do want to end on a bit of a high note here and say that I do actually really like the ref kits.
My ref kit.
Rep kits.
My ref kit.
I don't really know what they said.
My ref kit.
The activatable health kits. Once again, for anyone unaware, these are a new piece of gear that you can equip where you can activate it, it'll give you a boost of health, and higher rarities seem to be able to give you different bonuses. What I'm hoping this means is that we get significantly less lifesteal in this game, and staying alive during combat is much more of an active brain-on task rather than just shooting at an enemy. I think it's going to be a really fun system to play around. I think they can have some pretty crazy effects happen with these, and I just love the idea of injecting some fucking heroin and going crazy mode on a boss. Which, speaking of the bosses, goodness gracious, that is a big boy, holy shit, please open pre-orders, take my money. Now, that's about all I really wanted to talk about in this video. I'm sure there's gonna be plenty more BL4 related videos on this channel soon, but if you don't want to wait for that, there is, once again, 3 hours of me yapping about this showcase over on my live tab. But, again, that's gonna do it from me. However, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. What are your opinions about what I said here? What are your opinions just generally about BL4? I'd love to hear it all down in the comments below. That's gonna about do it for this one though. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, definitely consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, all of that. Down in the description will be a link to my Twitch channel where you can follow to be notified of when I go live, and just below that is a link to my Discord server where you can comment, join, and hang out. But with that all being said, I hope to see you guys in the next one.